Hey, what's happening? So my wife was focusing and she said, don't move. So there you go. Hey, how's it going, everybody? I hope you have some time to spend with me for a little bit right now. I'm bringing the show up on the monitor here. I'm in front of the drums instead of behind the drums. And I'm going to stay in front of the drums here and talk Ringo Starr. Happy birthday, Ringo. 80 years old. Peace and love, Ringo. So I thought this would be fun, a little risky as well, but I thought this would be fun. Why won't it click? Man, I'm just going to throw all these out our front door onto the highway. Okay, so I thought it'd be fun to talk Ringo, talk the Beatles. 80 years old. My parents didn't live that long. That's a long time. And I have to throw this in. I have to mention this, that as you all might know by now, that Joe Porcaro passed away last night, late last night, 11:27 Eastern Daylight Time, U.S. He was 90, and Ringo's 80. Wow. My parents were 66 and a half and a few days short of 72 when they each passed away. 80. Amazing career. And, of course, you either love Ringo or you don't. Let's see if we can stick to more on the love side. I know there's some people that don't respect Ringo and all that, but we'll get to that. What I'd like to know is tell me where you're watching from first. I'm in Globe, Arizona, which is 100 miles east of Phoenix, up in the mountains. It's a little bit cooler. Today it's only about 100, I think. And, huh? Yeah. Okay, so yeah, tell us where you're watching from. I'm in Globe, Arizona, and I'll give sort of my Ringo story and Beatles story, and then I'd love you to share yours. I'll be reading comments. This is a discussion. It's not me talking at you, okay? So as we all know, in the very early 60s, when the Beatles made their big splash on the Lawrence Welk show, or I'm sorry, not Lawrence Welk. Ed Sullivan show. I'm thinking of Iron Maiden. You know, it really changed pop culture, not just in America, but around the world. It changed pop culture, changed music, and it kept changing as they evolved. We'll get to that. And it really spawned generations of, especially that generation, and we'll get to that, of new drummers and guitar players, and people wanted to be that, whatever that was, right? Whatever that was. I mean, they had seen Elvis, but the Beatles were definitely clearly something different. Elvis kind of bridged the old world about a bit of 50s stuff with what was to come, and the Beatles were that. The start of the British invasion, and they just keep coming, which is great because the music's great. So I'm 57. Wow, did I say that? I'm 57, and I did not see the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan show and go, wow, I want to do that. I did not have that experience that so many that are 5, 10 years older than me and more had. So I'd love to hear your stories. There's a lot of younger people, much younger than I, who say, yeah, Ringo, I don't know from Ringo. He's not an influence and everything. And I'd like you to consider something. A couple weeks ago, I interviewed Nico McBrain again. And Nico talked about going to see the Beatles with his sisters at 12 years old. And it was that moment. He said he couldn't even hear them over the screaming. But he saw that, and that's what he wanted to do. So if Nico McBrain of Iron Maiden is an influence, maybe Ringo is an influence of yours. Just like if you're a John Bonham fan, right? Max Roach is probably an influence of yours and you don't know it. Gene Krupa, right? So it's just a different way to look at things. I have only one Beatles album. I had two, and I actually just looked for one of them, and it's gone. I think I lost it in one of my many divorces or something. It was the White Album. And I'll get to the other album in a moment. But I I posted, or I'm going to post something scheduled to post later today that talks about in 2015, 16, one of the big auction houses announced that Ringo Starr's personal edition of the White Album sold for more than any other album up to that point, and it might still hold that record. It had the serial number of 00000001. I don't remember how many zeros, but it was literally issue number 1 of the White Album. And in 2016, it sold for $750,000. So what's the most you've ever paid for an album, and what was it? So the album I do still have is unplayable, and it's unplayable for 2 reasons. My parents, when they were alive, I don't think they still have it now that they're gone, but while they were alive, they had a framing shop, Fast Frame, which is in the United States is a franchise. They framed art, did shadow boxes, and they surprised me one day with Sgt. Pepper's album, and it's unfolded. The album cover's open. You see the inside. The record is there, and the inner sleeve, and the clip-on mustache and badge. It's like totally complete. It's recessed. I forgot, what's that called, honey? My wife's an artist. When it's recessed in the different layers. You remember? No. Yeah, it's got different levels of matte, and they're recessed. It's beautiful. It's like totally pro done. It could go in a museum. So that's one reason why it's unplayable, because it's mounted behind glass. The other reason is because in one of my moves, I lived in Ventura, California, and I was moving home to help take care of my parents because my mother was very ill. And she was still up and around at this time, but that frame was in my friend's car who was helping me. We got to my parents' house. Of course, my mom comes out. Oh, I'm so happy to see you. You want me to make you guys sandwiches? And of course, after packing the moving van I was driving in his car, we said, yeah. So we went inside and we ate these sandwiches and unpacked. Meanwhile, the framed album had sat in his heated car all this time, and the edges of the LP are rippled. Oh my God, what that would be worth framed and so complete the way it is. Just broke my heart. But I still have it, and it's beautiful, and it's framed in my office. So that's what I have as far as their catalog. They were never a huge influence on me, and I'll give some shout outs and look at comments in a moment. I got the show right here on a monitor. They were never really a huge influence on me, but there are particular standout things. I remember being a little kid, maybe even before I started playing drums, which was towards the end of 1969. And I remember hearing songs like Paperback Writer, Help, and Hard Day's Night. And those songs got me amped up. They were rocking, even though I didn't really know what that meant. They were just cool, the harmonies, and you could actually understand the words, unlike a lot of stuff that's come out from Britain since. And those songs were just really cool. Then I got a little bit older, and I remember when Let It Be came out. And, they kind of morphed as people. They morphed from that sort of, they were wearing suits and ties, and they were so happy-go-lucky, goody two-shoes looking, to now, maybe a little jewelry here and there, longer hair, scruffy, the whole different vibe, right? Like the White Album. And they were going through social transformation. They'd gone to India, all that stuff. Experimented with stuff. But Let It Be is just an absolutely beautiful album. So I love that. And the White Album's just absolutely intriguing. So that's really the extent of my Beatles influence. I love what Paul has done since. He had an amazing career. George Harrison, and of course, Alan White got his big break at like 19 playing for John Lennon and Yoko Ono with his solo stuff. Played with George Harrison, as did Ian Pace, recorded with George Harrison and Paul McCartney. That's in one of my interviews with Ian. So a lot of neat stuff there. Tied to some of my biggest drumming heroes, but yet the Beatles are never a huge influence on me. Ton of respect, though. Ton respect. I'm not one of those people, and I know you're out there. You might even chime in, and I decided you're welcome to. If you just don't like Ringo, usually if someone gives bad comments on a birthday post, I ban them from the page. It's just, but this is a little different. I'm not one of those people that says, yeah, Ringo was just in the right place at the right time. Every freaking musician who has success was in the right place at the right time. I don't care how good or sucky they are. And there are no sucky, successful musicians. Can we just agree on that? Just because you don't like them doesn't mean they suck. And I'm including Lars, okay? Enough of that already. I don't know when that became fashionable. I don't see any reason to criticize any musician's music for any reason. So I'm not one of those people that says, oh, so simplistic. So is Nick Mason over time of Pink Floyd. So is Charlie Watts. But they were the right guys for that job at that time, and that's what mattered. Look at the music of the B-52s. All kinds of, there's endless examples, and it's pointless. Look at all the music Hal Blaine played on. None of that's complicated, right? Jim Keltner, none of that's complicated. But it's the right feel for that music. And that's what Ringo brought to the table. And I know what some of you are going to say, and I have it ready right here. Pulled it up last night. I just remembered this. That, and I know there's all these stupid jokes. Yeah, Ringo's not the best drummer. He's not the best drummer the Beatles had. Because Paul played on some songs. And I have that list here. Here we go. Here's some songs that Paul McCartney actually played drums on that were kept. I had the list here last night. Oh, here we go, I believe. Hold on, bear with me here. Bear with me and chime in. Sorry, I thought I had this ready and it sort of bounced away. Here we go. Here Paul McCartney played drums on. Here we go. And there's some really big tunes too. Here we go. Ready? There's just a handful. Wow. Why is this so difficult right now? You know what? I think I need new glasses too. You know what? Let me give some shout out. Let me see who's watching. I'll get back to that in a second. But it's a dry heat. Yeah, exactly. Out here in Arizona. Oh, wow. Rob, you're in Liverpool, Ringo's hometown. Very cool. Lee Davies, who I know is in UK. Hello from Napa. Ray Elfers, how are you? Alessandro. Is that got? I really do need new glasses. This sucks. Greg Diener, what's happening? Joking. Drums, how are you? Mo Clark, how are you? Thanks for watching. Chime in. Let us know where you're watching from, everybody. Let's go back to the songs that Paul played. A Day in the Life, I know, was one of them. I remember that from last night. Why is this so hard to find? Can you please find this while I continue talking? Thanks. It's right there somewhere. Okay, so my point is that drumming does not have to be complicated or even sophisticated, and that's subjective, to be impressive or be appreciated or respected. And the Beatles are the Beatles because of all four members. And we could say that about Led Zeppelin. We could say that about, any band. The band at that time is who they are because of the members. I also love the stuff that Ringo did as solo stuff. It's fun. It's happy. He's a personality, too. As my wife pointed out earlier today, he's a movie star. Not only was he in Help and The Yellow Submarine, the animated movie, they did the voiceover, but he was in Caveman with his wife. What was her first name? Ms. Black? Wow. Brain fart. These senior moments are just, hey, Kevin, what's happening? Beatles songs Paul McCartney played drums on. Okay, my wife's pulling up the list. So chime in. Let me know your favorite Beatles album. Let me know your favorite Beatles song. Let me know your favorite work by Ringo Starr. Hopefully your favorite Beatles song is one that Ringo played drums on. Let me know if you ever saw the Beatles or if you ever saw Ringo with Greg Bissonette on drums. Even Keith Emerson was in Ringo Starr's all-star band for a while. Imagine that. Keith Emerson, one of my favorite musicians. Pat says, Wisconsin. Thanks for doing this. So thank you, Pat. Honestly, I have a confession. I went back and forth on whether or not to do this. First, I was going to play a few Beatles songs. I'm not going to, and I'll tell you why. The reason I decided not to is because normally I played a bootleg recordings, and that's so that they don't get muted. Sometimes I cheat and I play things, they get muted. We have to fill out paperwork. It's a real pain. But there's 0 to none Beatles bootlegs, especially with quality where I can hear well enough to play to. So that's why I'm not back there doing that. Then I thought, the whole Ringo topic, you know, right guy, right place at the right time. Paul McCartney played on songs. Bernard Purdie claims he played on 21 songs. Can't remember the names. You know, there's all this stuff and a bunch of Ringo haters. But I thought, you know what? The dude was in the freaking Beatles, and he's 80. How can we not do this, right? So let's do this for better or worse, good, bad, and indifferent. What's your take? And I'd love to know, if it's okay, ladies, you can lie by a few months. What's your age, too? Give me your take on the Beatles. And what's your age? I gave mine up. I'm 57. My wife loves the Beatles fan. She's not 57. We'll leave it at that. What's your favorite Beatles album or song, honey? She's behind the camera. That's why I'm looking.
Beatles song? Wow,
She has a lot. Think about it while you dig that up for me. Okay. And my wife and I had completely different upbringings. Completely different. But yet similar in some ways, right? We can get to that. So let's see who from greetings from Costa Rica. Pura vida, buena vida para ti, usted también. Fernando, thank you so much for chiming in. Not a huge Beatles fan, but I like Blackbird a lot. Blackbird's a beautiful song. That is the only Beatles song I ever played in a band, and there's no drums. So I think I sat in front as part of our acoustic set with Going to California, Battle Forevermore, which I played mandolin. I think I might have helped sing background or something. Yeah, Blackbird is a beautiful song. Very Paul McCartney, right? Beatles songs that Paul McCartney played drums on in 1960. Oh, back in the USSR, Dear Prudence, The Ballad of Yoko and John, Hey Jude, I know for a fact, and also what was the one I said earlier? Here's another. I mentioned another one earlier. Now I don't remember. I found such a simple list last night. Where the hell did it go? Maybe someone knows. Let's look at some more stuff. Oh, Come Together is a fun song. Mike St. John says, play Come Together and get the feel right. That's hard. It is hard. And I'm not playing any Beatles because there's no bootleg versions with audio I can play to. So I'm not jumping back there. And I can't play to the official versions. They'll get muted, all that stuff. I just don't want to mess with that today. But it is hard. The dynamics. And the drums are very muted. It almost sounds like he's playing with mallets in a way. Maybe the rolls were overdubbed with mallets. I don't know. I saw a comment I want to go back from. Pat Connor says, my wife wants to know why is there Ringo haters. That's a great question. Maybe some of the Ringo haters can come out of the woodwork and answer that, but I'll give my take. Pat, what's your take? But for your wife and everyone, the reason there's Ringo haters is the same reason there's a lot of other haters of other drummers who play very simply. And yes, let's be honest. Who couldn't play a Beatles song, right? But I could play Emerson, Lake and Palmer, I could play Rush, I could play Genesis, but I didn't come up with that stuff. It's one thing to emulate. It's another thing to really get it right and speak the language. It's another thing to come up with it. And again, going back to the right guy for the job at the right time for the right thing, he had the right feel no matter how much direction he took from Paul pushing him off the drum throne saying, no, like this, and then him doing it, or George Martin saying, no, Ringo, like this. And that's one of the issues they had with Pete Best was timing on recordings. So a lot of drummers, and I think most of them might be younger. I think it might be more of a generational thing where a lot of drummers, especially younger, want to be impressed with flashy stuff and all that. And unless you're really a connoisseur of the art and the craft, there's on the surface, not a lot of flashy stuff about Ringo's drumming, but it's the right drumming for that music. And here's the interesting thing: the songs that Paul did play on, if you didn't know that, you'd never know it. So they had a sound. You know what I mean? They had a sound collectively, and Paul, I give him a lot of credit for playing the drums in it, not sounding like, oh, that's a different drummer, or Bernard Purdy or whomever else might have sat in. So I think that's an interesting topic, but I hope that answers the question. Oh, Kevin put in a link. Thank you. Let's look at that. Back in the USSR, Dear Prudence, the Ballad of Martha, My Dear, and Dear Prudence, Ballad. Here's more. Hold on. Really? You played the birthday song? You say it's your birthday? Oh, I didn't know that. I only see 3 songs listed here, so I don't think that's the whole list. But this is still helpful. Yeah, there were like 7 that we read last night. But thank you for that, Kevin. Ellis Anderson, and I'll scroll up. I missed a couple things. Ellis Anderson says, I was in the same position. I have a Paradiddle Groove I play with double kick involved. It took me a few weeks to write it. I then taught my friends it, and they said it was fairly simple. So I said, well, you write it then. Yeah, exactly. Emulating's one thing. I can emulate just about anything that I hear. I have a real good ear, pretty good dexterity. I could pretty much emulate anything. But I would have come up with the parts for Carnival 9 or In a Cage or Minstrel in the Gallery or the Wanton Song. You just name it, right? That's the difference. Victor Tedeschi says, it's hard to pick one song. Rubber Soul, was hitting strong. That's a great example. Good one. I saw something by John Kinsting. I want to scroll up. John says, I remember the first instant that I heard the Beatles. Ironically, as a drummer, what first amazed me, I can't see very well, and made my hair stand on the back of my neck was the vocal harmonies. Yeah, absolutely, the vocal harmonies. And that's a whole other influence they had on other musicians. Yes, was highly influenced by the Beatles' harmonies as they were by the Everly Brothers. John Anderson and his brother were in a band that was like an Everly Brothers cover band. They wanted to be the Everly Brothers. So, yeah, that's a really good point. LaGrange, Kentucky, humid and hot here. That's right, Greg. Hey, Gino, what's happening? So let's hear from some more people regarding Ringo, whether you like him, whether you hate him. Give us your take. And I'd like to know your age, if that's not too intrusive. Like I said, ladies, you can fudge it by a few months if you want. My wife says you don't have to answer at all. Yes, you do, and you could fudge your age by a few months, says Uncle Dan. So, speaking of, honey, what's some of your favorite works by the Beatles? Do you have a few? Yellow Submarine, that whole concept album in it. Yeah. Hey Jude, Let It Be. Were you into Sgt. Pepper's at all? Yeah, Sgt. Pepper's is almost like a musical before it was made into a musical. The outfits and just the whole thing. A huge influence on the album, well, particularly the song Sowing the Seeds of Love by Tears for Fears, even the album cover, that same type of art. So good song list, dear. Thank you. Jay Johnson says 49. Ringo Starr is the drummer I'd want if I was a guitarist. Wow, that's a interesting statement. Thank you for that. John Kisting says he's 108 years old. John, I'm glad you're getting on at 108. Just kidding. He says Ringo's one of my few drummers. He says Ringo's one of the few drummers older than me. John, you're not that old. That's funny. So again, give us your take. Favorite Ringo song, whether it's solo or with the Beatles. Favorite Beatles album. Did you ever see the Beatles live? If you're old enough, did you ever see Ringo live? Um, did you see Caveman the movie? What was his wife's name? Barbara Black. Barbara Black?
Barbara
Bach. Barbara Bach. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's when they met, right? They met on the movie set. Yeah, in Caveman. Yeah. um, Bach, that's right. So, hey, Martin, how are you? Stephen Shinder's watching. Hey, Stephen. Stephen, I hope you don't mind me saying, is 25 and a half. Are you a Beatles fan at all, Steve? Steve works for Drum Talk TV behind the scenes. Right now, I'm putting him on the spot. Kevin says, oh, how old? Right. And then it says, oh, I lost it. Just turned 56 this past Sunday. Happy birthday. We're only a year apart, Kevin. That's awesome. Cool. That's a great take. Oops. What does that say? It says, John says, bong. Got to get you into my life. Oh, song. Sorry. I thought you meant the band Bong. What are you laughing at? Okay, song. Got to get you into my life. Reason, the perfect shuffle. Oh, okay. Got to get you into my life. Yeah, that's true. And an orchestrated song as well. It's interesting that the Beatles started orchestration with pop music way the F back then. Way back then. That's a whole boundary they broke right after they broke the biggest boundary, creating what became popular music, really, in a big way, I think. Cool. Stephen Shinder. Are you a Beatles fan at all? Do you have a favorite Beatles album or song? Yes. Did you want to say something, Mrs. Shinder? Oh, you were looking at me like... Oh, okay. That's not why anyone else is looking. So, I would love to have Ringo on, obviously, and that's not, of course, the easiest thing to do. But what question would you ask Ringo if you were on set with me on Drum Talk TV and we had Ringo as a guest? What would you ask him? I would ask. I had a whole list. Shinder's list. It's a good list. Gosh, there's so many things to ask him. I think I would ask him to take us through the trajectory, that's a difficult word for a drummer, of he's still playing music, so with drums separately and recording processes separately, to answer this question from when you started in the early 60s till now, talk about how technology has changed, how engineering of gear has changed, and how that affected your approach to recording, your approach to playing, and different things like that. Because remember, back in the day, George Martin was working this thing where the tape reels were right here, and there were a couple sliders and big knobs, and that was about it, right? They were doing 4-track recordings and bouncing it down, and I can't even imagine how they came up with what they came up with, what they had to work with, which I think really also speaks volumes to the production work and the credit that Sir George Martin, deserves. Amazing, just amazing. So that's one of my questions. Oh, John says, did your White Album have the original Forbidden artwork photo? Oh, Michael. Oh, there it is. Sorry, Michael, I'll get to yours. John asked if my White Album had. No, it didn't, and I forgot what that was. And it wouldn't have been the White Album if it had that, because it wasn't called the White Album till they removed it and then called it the White Album. But I think I know what you mean. The same songs were on it. I forgot, what was the forbidden artwork? Do you remember, honey? The babies?
It was dolls. They
Cut up dolls?
I think that's the one.
Was that it? A bunch of hacked up Barbies or something? I don't remember. The babies. Yeah, that's what John's saying. Michael St. John of drumline.net, follow him, says, I like Ticket to Ride, Keeping Time, with the simplest yet creative playing. Absolutely, with really cool vocals. And again, you could understand every lyric. Anybody else want to chime in? Oh, Michael Amira says was 13 in 1966, got the same Ludwig kit for $400 and started to play drums. He's 67 and still playing. Ticket to Ride, a favorite as well. Awesome. Michael, thanks so much for chiming in. Let us know where you're tuning in from. Steven Shinder, 25 and a half, says favorite album might be, Revolver, yeah. Tomorrow Never Knows is great. Totally fits you too, Steve. Steven's a huge Yes fan, who of course were, like I said, influenced by the Beatles. They covered a Beatles song on their 35th year anniversary tour. If you watch Songs from Tsongas, the DVD, they played the second song of the show was Every Little Thing, a great song. Yeah, my wife's waging it. Yes, dear. Oh, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Yeah. Didn't they cover that from Elton John? Just kidding. Yeah, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Have any of you ever tried Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds? We all know what that means, right? I remember I was shocked when I found that out. I was like 10, maybe 12. And when someone told me what the song was about and what that meant, I was like horrified. What? You mean they do drugs? A few years later, well, you know the rest of that story. Let's see a few more comments. Let's take a look. We'll scroll back up as well. Steven says that song was also on the first Yes album. That's right. Every Little Thing. Liverpool, England, Ringo's hometown is where... Oh, that's Rob Jones. Sorry. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds came from John Kidd's artwork. You mean Julian's artwork, but it stands for LSD. But I never heard that part. Interesting. Oh, wow. Rob confirmed that. Okay, this is the one time John Kinsting's not full of crap. Okay. Wow, I never knew that. Lucy was a school painting by Julian. I'd love to see. Can you pull that up, please, dear? My wife's going to pull it up, and I'll hold it in front of the camera. Let's see if I missed any other comments. Come on, let's hear some more. Favorite album, favorite song, favorite vocals, favorite Ringo drum part. Did you ever see him live? Did you ever see the Beatles live? Do you not like Ringo? If not, why? You will never, ever hear me ask that again about another drummer. It just seems to be a weird thing with Ringo. I know why idiots don't like Lars. Sorry if you're one of those idiots. I say that with all love in the world. And I just think it's BS. It's stupid, really. Get over it. Get over yourselves. Put out a platinum album, then tell me how much he sucks. Let's see if I missed any others up here. I did not. So I'd love to see some new comments. John, you know I'm playing with you. Because there was actually another time you weren't full of crap. So, Beatles. I'd say my favorite album might be, I was going to say Let It Be, but then my son Steve threw out Revolver. Revolver's great. It's between those two. Totally different albums, right? I would have loved to have seen them back in the day. The old Vox amplifiers and that Black Oyster, Ludwig kit, the Rickenbacker hollow body that George played. Those must have been the days, right? Can you imagine at the Hollywood Bowl? Can you imagine that? And I think of that every time I've gone to the Hollywood Bowl for a concert. I thought, the freaking Beatles played here. They were there. They were right there. And driving there through the Cuenca Pass, I thought, they saw all this stuff. Their eyes saw all that. It's a weird kind of thing, right? Rob Jones also says, "Oh, went to see Ringo's All-Star Band about 12 years ago in Liverpool. Edgar Winter was the best with Frankenstein. Wow, that's cool." Was Keith Emerson on that tour? Because I know Keith was with them for a while as well. That's cool. The Cavern is still going in Liverpool? I did not know that. Wow. Octopus Garden. First time I heard it was on Sesame Street. Wait, let me scroll back up and see that. Octopus's Garden. First time I heard it was that. That's funny, Kevin. Rob Wallace says no. No to what? I'm sorry. Oh, he's answering John Kinsting. It says, "I've heard the Shea Stadium concert was madness. Nobody, including the Beatles, could hear the music." Yeah, I've heard that too. That's when everyone basically, if I could say this, lost their shit. Basically, Shea Stadium. Can you imagine? Think about this. All the big bands in more recent times that have played the big stadiums. Paul McCartney doesn't count because he was in the Beatles, but like Genesis, Led Zeppelin, Elton John, the biggest of the bigs. So can you imagine way back when was Shea Stadium playing at a baseball stadium way back then to be that big, that far back, that early in the history of this pop music thing? How do you think that affected them? How do you sleep that night? What do you do after that? Because they say once you achieve success at anything on any level, doing anything, the hardest act to follow is your own. They say that about authors, photographers, painters, musicians, scientists that make breakthroughs, everything. I did that with my kids after the first kid. I was like, how do I top this? And to be honest with you, they got better and better as I went along. Anyways, what? That was sweet to say because Steven's the youngest and he by far is the sweetest and the smartest. I didn't say that publicly. It's just on Facebook in front of our million fans. Oh, Kevin says, you mentioned Greg Bissonette. Yes, he's a monster, technically proficient drummer. But when he plays with Ringo's All-Star Band, he plays for the songs right. Yep. So my point is you have to play for the musical situation. Absolutely. And Rob Jones, I'll get to your next comment. Kevin, that's such a great point because that term playing for the song doesn't always mean simplistic. You hit it on the head, the nail on the head when you say to play for that song situation, because to that point, Brian Tichy said in an interview with me when we were doing the Ox and the Loon documentary, his tribute to Keith Moon and John Entwistle, he said, what is playing for the song? Neil Peart played for the song in La Villa Strangiato. Keith Moon played for the song, even though he soloed through everything with his three backup dudes. So that's a great point. Greg Bissonette is a monster. Look what he did with David Lee Roth's early solo stuff and everything since. And then when he plays Ringo stuff, he plays the way Ringo would have played it. Great point. Thanks for bringing that up. And Rob Jones says, waiting for Peter Jackson's director of Lord of the Rings Beatles movie of the last days. Oh, wow. I don't know about this. My son Steve might know about this. Steven, do you know about that? Interesting. Rob, elaborate. What the hell's that all about? Love Lord of the Rings, love Peter Jackson, love the Beatles. My wife's got an itch on her wrist. Yeah. Oh, she's giving me a time signal. I told her we'd only go about a half hour because we've both got so much to do. So I'm going to wrap it up. Any last minute comments? You want to chime in quick, rapid fire. Favorite album, favorite Ringo album, favorite Beatles album with Ringo playing drums, favorite Ringo drums song, whether with the Beatles or solo. Did you see him? Did you see them? Do you want to see him? Do you want to see them? I'll see what I can do for you. What's the deal? What would you ask Ringo in an interview? Come on, last minute, rapid fire. And if you're seeing this on the archive, please go ahead and chime in anyways. I'll be reviewing this. And most of all, thank you so much for joining me here on Drum Talk TV to talk about Ringo Starr, celebrate his 80th birthday. Peace and love. Wore my peace sign shirt that I got. Do you know when I got this? I'm asking my wife. Do you know when I got this?
I don't remember.
The earliest recollection I have of seeing me in this shirt is in Australia at the Whitsundays when I interviewed Mal, the captain of the Eureka 2. That was 10 and a half years ago, so I got the shirt before that. There you go. And it's a great shape. It looks new. Yeah, I'm wearing it. I've washed it a couple times. Give me a freaking break, all right? Yeah, and it just says, yes,
I was
Enja?
going to say, that quote that John Lennon said about Ringo, I think that would be a great way to end it.
That he should have been the drummer for Led Zeppelin. My wife said the great way to end this, other than thanking all of you and thanking Ringo so much for decades and decades of wonderful music and influence and peace and love, having such a great attitude. This guy has never bitched and complained about any of the flack he's gotten. That's called class. Okay, take note. What is the John Lennon quote you want me to use?
I'm going to mess it up a little bit. But
Okay.
when people ask him, is he the best? He might not be the best drummer, but he's the best Beatle.
Wow, I just got goosebumps and choked up. My wife said, here, I'm going to give you the mic for her. Okay. So when asked about is Ringo Starr the greatest drummer, John Lennon said he's not the greatest drummer, but he's the greatest Beatle. Wow, that's intense. Very cool. Peace and love to you all as well. Thanks, everybody, so much. Thank you for joining us late. Rewind, watch the whole thing, answer the questions. I'll be going through these and looking at everything Ringo influenced him musically. Oh, I'd ask Ringo who influenced him musically. I don't know if I know that. Yeah, that's a great question. I have to think it's one of the jazz greats because in those days, we're talking what, 61, 62, 63, just like Keith Moon, just like John Bonham, they didn't have rock examples. They only had Mitch Mitchell, right? All those guys. Oh, you listen to the really early Pink Floyd and Nick's drumming. Nick Mason's drumming in Pink Floyd is so jazzy. It's great. So that I just wonder who, though. It could have been the obvious Gene Krupa or Louis Bellson, or it could have been Papa Joe Jones, Sonny Payne, Rufus Speedy Jones, any of those guys. That's a great question. Oh, Cozy Cole. Is that a fact, John Kinsting? That is awesome. One second. Pat Connor says, P&L. Oh, take peace and love. Absolutely. Take care, all. You too. Love everybody so much. One last word from Enja, my wife. Oh, she's just saying, let's get out. Yeah. Okay, let's get out. Thanks, everybody, so much. We are making the new vlog schedule. That's what I do here. We're making the new vlog schedule. So I'll be doing this back to about 3-4 times a week. Got a Return to Forever. Return to Forever is on my list to do next. Always open for suggestions. Write the show at team@drumtalktv.com. You can send your videos into videos. Well, no, I'm not going to give you that. Go to the submissions link on the website, www.drumtalktv.com. And in the upper right corner, video submissions, and you'll see all the tips and guidelines. Thanks, everybody, so much. Take care.